one thing we did say goodbye to was the title race. And we definitely thought it was absolutely over when Bayern Munich surprisingly dropped all 3 points to VfL Bochum last week. And then Leverkusen lost their game to Bremen, and we certainly thought no chance. Then the unlikely happened, Bayern Munich dropping 2 more points in the following match day against Union Berlin. This all comes in the backdrop, of course, of this being ahead of the international break as well. So it's not like Bayern can just rectify this issue right away. Instead, they have to. We can all now sit on these 2 games without a win. It's interesting. I mean, we get to talk about Leverkusen in a moment in great length, but the gap all of a sudden is 6 points. Now, that's still a 3-game swing because Bayern Munich have the better goal differential, right? But it's weird that Bayern Munich, for the 2nd game in a row, dropped points against a team that we didn't expect them to drop points. They navigated all the big ones this year, but Bochum and Union, I didn't have that on my bingo card at all.
No, not at all. I mean, what result for Union Berlin as well. You can see in the stands at full time, them celebrating up in like the kind of expensive seats, as you will, as well, after beating Frankfurt as well the week before. Huge result for Union Berlin. I didn't get a chance to watch this game because, like I said at the top of the show, I was watching the Augsburg game for my sins and then went for a hike. So, I mean, this game just kind of got away from me, and I just assumed it would be a foregone conclusion. So I thought, there's not much point watching Bayern absolutely thump, Union Berlin without much concern. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting, and it's maybe quite similar to what we talked about with, maybe what we will come on to talk about with Leverkusen, where, like the Bochum game, where, Thomas Müller plays up front and it doesn't quite work out. In this game, Company makes some changes. Stanisic in at right back, Dyer in the centre back, Gnabry in at left back, Urbig in goalkeeping position. Made one kind of high profile mistake for the goal. We're maybe seeing these kind of backup players not really kind of keep up with the standard that Bayern have set this season. And, against 2 very, very committed teams in Bochum and Union Berlin, who are fighting tooth and nail for every point at this stage of the season, it's just not good enough, And I mean, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this game because you obviously watched it. But from what I could tell from our subscribers and what I saw in the chat, there's the usual kind of criticism of Serge Gnabry, who did very little in this match. From what I could tell as well, watching the extended highlights, there seems to be an over-reliance on Michael Olise, which we've seen a lot this season. I've talked a lot about myself, actually, where I was saying, he's more or less the most important player in attacking sense this season. I think he's actually overtaken Jamal Musiala this season in terms of being their key playmaker. Far, far better than the likes of, Sané and Gnabry and Coleman, for example. And it just feels like unless Michael Olise can do something magical in these games, Bayern do kind of struggle. But yeah, I'll throw this over to you because you watched this game.
I did watch it. I watched it in the Leipzig Media Center ahead of the Leipzig Dortmund game, together with Dan Whiten and Sepp Stafford-Blur, friends of the show, right? And we sat together and we just took it all in. And when Leroy Sané made it 1-0, there was a sense of like, yeah, here we go, whatever, right? Because it was for so long, it was 0-0. And then Hollerbach with the equalizer. And yeah, a high-profile mistake by Urbig. I read on Blue Sky it was a big mistake. I think it's a mistake. It's a mistake that Jan Manuel Neuer made often as well. He's a goalkeeper who gets involved, who likes to be proactive in the box. He does these things, and especially in his young years, we have to remember Neuer was prone to making mistakes. Even today, and even in his high time, right? Because he's such an aggressive goalkeeper. In that sense, you take risks, and Bayern Munich did sign Urbig because he is like Neuer. You cannot sign a keeper that is like Neuer and then expect him not to play like that, right? And I think the Bayern bosses handled it quite well, saying like, look, he's a young goalkeeper. We committed to signing him and make him the future of the club. We can't just throw him under the bus because of a mistake, not even a big mistake. It's just a mistake, because I do think it was actually still defendable even after that. And also, look, one goal by Union Berlin shouldn't lead to Bayern Munich dropping points. This is also part of the story here, isn't it? The game ended 1-1. It wasn't like Union Berlin scored 2 other goals here, right? That is, I think, a really big thing that we need to discuss here, how toothless Bayern Munich were in this game at times, and the fact that they had to rely on a perfect defense and didn't quite get it. And maybe the games also are just catching up a little bit to Bayern Munich. I saw this, someone sent this to our subscriber chat, that South Korea's head coach heavily criticized Bayern Munich for overplaying Kim. I mean, the audacity of that, that kind of stuff makes me angry. Like, who do you think you are? I understand that Kim is an important player for South Korea, but like, why would Bayern Munich rest a player so that South Korea have him for playing against Oman and Yemen, right? Like, by all due respect, but we had a similar thing in Canada with Alphonso Davies, where some journalists like went on public television and like criticized Bayern Munich for overplaying Alphonso Davies so that he would be available in CONCACAF like Nations League games. Like, at the end of the day, like, I have this from me, I have a very positive outlook of international football. I like the national teams and all that kind of stuff. But in the end of the day, the clubs are paying 100% of the salary. Kim makes 10 million euros plus because he plays for Bayern Munich and not because he plays for South Korea. And so when it comes down to it, and a player needs rest, it will be for the national team and not for the club team. Like, imagine, like, I go to the Transfermarkt, I'm like, like, I had so much work for gegenpressing, so I will take the next week off, and you're still paying for it. There's no way. There's just no way. You know what I mean? Like, imagine that in real life. Like, someone would do this in real life. So, like, and I think, my point is, like, there's a lot of games right now, and Bayern Munich can't really afford to rotate because every single game is still important. We'll get to Leverkusen here in a moment, but the lead at the top of the Bundesliga table, it's not 12 points, it's not 9 points, it's 6. You drop another game, it's 3, and then all of a sudden, Vincent Kompany will hear it again because, as you always say, Bayern Munich is only really three defeats away, or not winning 3 times in a row from absolute chaos. What is he supposed to do? He can't rest that guy because the national team wants to play him.
Yeah, and that's the kind of crux of it, isn't it? They're in a situation with Bayern where they kind of have to rely on the players who have continued to perform for them. And Kim's a good example of that. They can't really rely on Eric Dyer for an extended period of time. I know Stanisic can certainly play centre back, but he's needed a right back because they don't have a right back in that team. Yeah. So Kompany's kind of spinning his plates from one week to the next. One player I did actually kind of want to focus in on was actually Jamal Musiala, because if we talked after Florian Wirtz picked up his injury for Leverkusen, and we said, well, just prior to that, he was really beginning to look quite tired. He was looking jaded. His output for Leverkusen had certainly dropped off. And it was partly to play for Leverkusen really dropping points because they were so reliant on him to be the difference maker. And I do kind of wonder if we're maybe getting into a similar situation with Musiala with Bayern Munich. He's only got 2 goals and 1 assist in 10 league games in 2025 so far. And the interesting thing is, if you kind of take a look at his underlying stats, I was looking just a moment ago there, if you look at his non-penalty goals and assists this season, he's equal with Kingsley Coman in the Bundesliga. He's got less than Olise, he's got less than Serge Gnabry, he's got less than Leroy Sané, and far less than Harry Kane. And, even if you kind of want to take a look at, I was thinking, okay, well, maybe it's just a case of creating chances and nobody's finishing. But even if you look at his key passes, he's got 37 in the Bundesliga so far. Michael Olise's got 58. Harry Kane has 65. So he's got about half as many key passes, which surpass at least a shot as Harry Kane does this season. And he is kind of dropping off, I would say. 2 seasons ago, he was averaging 0.9 non-penalty goals and assists in the Bundesliga. Last season, it was 0.77. This season is 0.7. So he's gone from 0.9 to 0.77 to 0.7. So it is dropping, and that could just be a case of him, struggling for fitness, struggling for match sharpness, maybe struggling in the system. But this interesting thing that I think is even worth highlighting here is that if you look at his goals per 90, they haven't really changed. So this season is 0.59, which is actually an improvement on last season's 0.51, which is a slight improvement on the season before, 0.49, and before that was 0.31. So that's kind of gradually going up. But if you look at his assists over the last 3 seasons, it's 0.41 to 0.26 to 0.11 this season. So he's creating about a quarter as many assists per game as he was 2 seasons ago. And, he played in this game, didn't create an assist, didn't create a goal, wasn't his finest performance by any means. And that I'm not saying Musiala's at fault for these last 2 results, because he certainly isn't, and he didn't even start against Bochum. So I really want to make that clear. I don't think he's the problem here. But like Florian Wirtz, who Leverkusen were over-reliant on, he's beginning to look a little tired, and his form has really dropped off recently. And I think that's just worth bearing in mind, I think, going forward, because Bayern do have a really, really tough schedule coming up. It's something I actually took a look at last night before or after the Leverkusen game. And we'll come on to talk about Leverkusen's games coming up. But if you take a look at Bayern's, I think Bayern actually probably have the tougher run-in towards the end of the season. They've got St. Pauli at home, which you would think is an easy one, but St. Pauli have been better on the road this season. They then go to Augsburg, who've conceded like 2 goals in the last 15 games or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
They then play Dortmund at home, which, in my opinion, has all the hallmarks of a surprise Dortmund win, because that's just the way Dortmund are.
Just like last year.
Just like last year. They then play Heidenheim. Okay, fine, that's a straightforward one. They then play Mainz, then Leipzig, then Gladbach, and then they finish up with Hoffenheim. And that's 4 teams who have been better in the second half of the season as well. So, and not to mention the fact that they also have to juggle Champions League as well if they get past Inter Milan. So, some really tough games there for Bayern to kind of juggle. And if their form this season is really anything to go by, especially in the last 5 or 6 weeks, then you would think they will drop points there if, they continue to try and juggle the Bundesliga and the Champions League together.
Well, and then also Musiala is with the national team now, right? 2 important games against Italy because of the introduction of the Nations League. These games now matter. It's not like in the past where and Germany, Italy is a big fixture. I assume the players will care. So it's not like you can just rest there. Wirtz will miss those 2 games with his injury, and he's gonna come back and maybe even rest it, right? And Musiala is so very important for this team, and you hope that he can stay fit through it. It's too many games. I mean, that's just the bottom line, isn't it? Like, when is Musiala supposed to get a rest? The kid has been playing like 50, 60 games every year since he started turn professional as a 17-year-old. Like, when is he supposed to get a rest? When the season is over, and then we assume Bayern Munich will go back deep into the Champions League. We assume Germany will advance to UEFA Nations League. And then you have this Club World Cup sandwiched in there as well, which is going to be an interesting juggle, because I'm not 100% sure how the UEFA Nations League that almost runs parallel with the Club World Cup, how that is all going to work. It's so much. It's too much. And, we're robbing ourselves from these top players playing at their very top all the time. And I mean, I talked to players. I talked to several players from several clubs this weekend, and they were like, yeah, we need games now where in North American sports where the schedule is normal, you talk about scheduled losses, right? Where clubs look at the schedule and they're like, oh, if we lose this game, that's a scheduled loss. Like, if we win it, that's great, but like, we just assume we're going to lose it because like we played like 2 days before or even in the night before, and we won't be up for par. So like, we're going to rest some of our guys. We're going to give some of our depth players time. And if we lose the game, so be it, right? Like, and then the way that Bundesliga table works, and because it's all different competitions, you can't really do the same, right? Bayern used to be able to do it because they didn't have anyone pushing them. Now they do. So they can't really do it in the Bundesliga, because the moment they rest players, we've seen this against Bochum and we've seen this against Union Berlin, they drop points, right? So it is a really it's a conundrum that these coaches have to solve, and it robbing us of having players play at their best form. I mean, we see it with Musiala. Veth is now injured, and he's probably injured because he's been playing too much. Javi Simmons at Leipzig is another good example, right? A player that's probably been playing too much football in his career already. I mean, I can go on and on and on. And that I think it's really frustrating to see, because I think we're robbing ourselves of seeing these players at their prime at times. And at Bayern Munich, you see it, right? Like this is maybe also what can give the title race a little bit of hope. It's the worst possible way, because we're saying the title race can be potentially be open again because Bayern Munich have to play too many games. So it's really because not of tactics or having the best players. It's really about load management that keeps this title race open. But that's where we are at now.
Yeah, and it's the same with every team. You know, Frankfurt struggle because they've got to juggle the Europa League. Dortmund struggle because they're amazing in the Champions League and they only seem to care about that. They don't seem to make an effort in the Bundesliga, and Leverkusen have as well. You know, I think there's been a huge difference between Leverkusen fighting in the Champions League and Leverkusen fighting in the Europa League this season in their form. As a result of that. So yeah, no, I'm not exactly going to get the violin out and play for Bayern Munich, because every team in the Bundesliga, and it's actually probably the most defining factor of the second half of the season, that every team that's playing in Europe after Christmas has probably notably dropped off in one way or another. And yeah, Bayern are no different from that. But as you said, the key difference is, unlike in the past where the hope would be a Dortmund or a Leipzig who would also drop off, it seems as though Bayern Munich Bayer Leverkusen are determined to try and stick around, and they showed that this weekend.